Hey guys, I'm back. So yeah, it's been a minute, and yeah, I needed a bit of a break around November, beginning of November. I think it was maybe like end of October, beginning of November. I started to feel extremely tired. I was getting a bit slumpy with my reading, so that means like for me, I was still reading. I just wasn't reading as vigorously as I was before, and I was just wanting to do, other things. So I needed to take a break, and I took that break, and now I have come back, getting ready to turn over a new leaf for the new year. When I think back, 2020 has been fucking exhausting. All the way around, we've had just like a year, like I don't think it'll be a year that has been like no other year that I've ever lived. I mean, even I've had some bad years, like the year before when I broke my ankle, a few years ago when I tore my Achilles tendon. Those were not good years either for me, but this one right here was worse than all of that, so we made it. We're almost the end of the year. We're getting ready to embark on 2021. So I thought I would come back here and do my top books of 2020. Now, keeping in mind, these are my top books of 2020 from the ones that I read. I did read some new books from this year, but I didn't read loads of them. I kind of tried to stay away from that. And I made the goal to myself was to try to read the books that I thought that would hit the 4 or 5 star mark. And that's what I went with. And because I did that, I managed to read, I feel, some really good books. So let's get started so this doesn't take too long. But yeah. Happy to be back and happy to be sharing with you my best reads of 2020. So let's get started. Okay, the first book on my list is Heavy, an American memoir, which is by Kiese Laymon. This was the very first book that I read in 2020, and oh my God, it broke me. I mean, it broke me down. Now, you can see this book is not that long. It's hovering around 239 pages. But this man wrote the hell out of his memoir. Now, I finished reading the book, and the first thing I said was, I think I went on Instagram and I said, does one have to have a tragic life to be able to be such a great writer? And luckily people came to my rescue and said, no girl, you don't have to have a tragic life to be a good writer. Because I was like, well damn, because he's writing the hell out of this memoir, so highly recommend this one. Kiese Laymon is a very interesting person, and if you're on Instagram, you should definitely follow him. He's a great guy. Wonderful book. I highly recommend it. He does some really good, there's some really like creative ways he uses to talk about his life. I just feel like, wow, what brilliance is, it's just awesome. Awesome stuff in this one. So we go to February and we get The Last Thing You Surrender by Leonard Pitts Jr. Okay. Y'all know who Leonard Pitts Jr. is. He is, yes, the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. Now, I picked this book up the year before, I think in the middle of the year, and it just sat on my shelves, and I just kept saying, oh my God, I gotta read this book. So when it was February and it was Read So Lit Black History Month in February, I picked The Last Thing You Surrender as our group read. Oh, my God. This book had me on the roller coaster ride of my life, okay, when I was reading this one. I literally was clutching pearls I didn't have, worrying about what was going to happen next to these main characters. This is a historical fiction that takes place during the World War II period. And you have the World War II period from black and white perspectives, along with a lot of other historical events and things that take place in the U.S. that are crucial to understanding the U.S. and why it is the way it is today. This book had me, I tell you, had me on my knees. I was just like, the last thing you surrender is my soul from reading this book, because I just was like, wow, what a read this was. It's a very big book. It's hovering around a little over 400 pages. Oh, sorry, 500 pages. But I tell you, so worthwhile. Great, great writing and great storytelling. Definitely check it out. It pains me to death to know that most people or most bloggers are not reading these books by Leonard Pitts Jr. He's such a wonderful storyteller, and I wish he wasn't so underrated, because he really deserves accolades. He's just wonderful. The next book on my list is My Absolute Darling by Gabrielle Talents. So when I started reading this one, we were into the pandemic. It was the month of March. And I had had this book since the year before. I bought it at the Festival America, and it was there where I met Gabrielle Talent, and he signed my book. And I was like, oh God, I got to get my mind right. I got to get my mind right to read this book. So finally got my mind right and finally picked it up. And this is literary fiction. And it is a book that tells the story of an abusive relationship between a father and his daughter. And I tell you, this book is so good. The writing is phenomenal. And Gabrielle Talent does something really particular with the writing of this story, mixed with his nature scenes that he writes. Just beautiful writing, and just the way he tells the story of this young girl, and he tells it through her voice, but it is very authentic. And I think it's because Gabrielle Talent was raised pretty much with a lot of women, so I think he was very in tune to the way women think and the way they talk and that kind of thing. And so that's why the main character, the young girl's voice, sounds authentic. But it's just a great story. But it tells, you know, of abuse and how abuse can continue. It really studies this idea of how abuse can continue on, and when you think the person should be fed up and leave, they don't. And yeah, so if you're the kind of person who is squeamish about reading about abuse and stuff like that, I would say give this one a miss, because there's some things in here that could be a little traumatizing. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend it. The next two books are actually graphic novels, and these are in French, but if they ever get translated into English, I highly recommend them. These are L'Odyssée de Kim Volume 1 and L'Odyssée de Kim Volume 2. So this one is De la Syrie à la Turquie, and this one is De la Turquie à la Grèce. And basically this is the story of Akem, who is trying to get from Syria to France to join his wife and his in-laws. And it is harrowing, to say the least. And it does discuss all the things that we've been discussing lately about people immigrating and what they go through to immigrate. And this one is so well done. It's a journalist. He's like a graphic novel journalistic writer. So what he does is he tells Hakim's story through the graphic novel form. So just so you can get a chance to see some of the artwork, it's like that. Very, very good read. Had me on the edge of my seat at some points. Just a really good read. The volume 3 is out as well, but volume 3 I gave it 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed these a lot more. Okay, my next book on the list is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Okay, now this one is a reread. And, oh my God. Well, you know what I think about Isabel Wilkerson when I think of The Warmth of Other Suns. It's probably the nonfiction that I recommend the most because it's written in the narrative nonfiction format, but also because it is a book that is a must read if you want to understand the U.S. and why it is what it is. It's so thoroughly written and you learn so much, and it takes the stories of these different Americans, and you see these Black Americans moving from the South, and one's going out west to California, another one is, they're going up to New York, Chicago, and you follow them and you follow how they try to make their lives the best way they can, as quick as they can. And it's just really, really informative. And reading it a second time around, I read it with my book club. And we read it the month of June when we were talking a lot about Black Lives Matter and the uprisings were going on in the States. And it hit home perfectly that we were reading it at that moment. And for me, rereading it a second time, it was, if not even more poignant to me, the second reading than it was the first reading. So highly recommend this. I tell you, if you haven't read this, y'all, I don't know what y'all doing with your lives, but you need to read this. Okay, next book on my list is Sugar by Bernice L. McFadden. You've heard me review this one and talk about this one. And I reread this, I think it was a month of April or May. I reread it so that I could interview Bernice L. McFadden. And it was for the 20th anniversary edition of Sugar. And here it is right here. So yeah, I love everything McFadden. I had the pleasure of meeting her the last time I was in the States because she works in my hometown at the university down the road from where I live, which is called Tulane University. And we met up and she signed my book and we had a drink together and chatted. And she is just the coolest freaking person you can ever imagine. Like the coolest person. And Sugar is such a fantastic book. This is another one, if you haven't read it, because it's been out a long time, 20 years, y'all. Come on. Where y'all at? Y'all need to read this. Next book on my list is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. Now, you all know this book because it has literally been all over the place. I read this one, I think it was around June or July, maybe. And I was reading this for the BookTube prize. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did a wonderful review where I was gushing like mad. I say read it, even if it doesn't have punctuations, get over it and read it anyway. It's really, really good. Bernadine Evaristo. Next book on my list is Chintu by Jennifer Nansabuga Makumbi. This was the Read So Lit summer read along and it was amazing. Oh my God. Okay, I love family stories. So I was all in for this one. Multi-generational. Chintu, he's the beginning of many generations, and he makes a mistake, and because of that mistake, he is cursed. And all the generations to follow him are cursed as well. So you're reading a multi-generational story, and you're looking at how these generations are cursed, like what happens to them. Oh my God. And how they try to break the curse. Such a good book. You learn so much about Ugandan culture and history through the book, which is beautifully woven into this wonderful story of Chintu. This is my first Ugandan novel, and I plan to read everything else that Jennifer Natsabuka Makumbi puts out. I highly recommend this one, and I recommend this cover, like bomb. Okay, look at that cover, bomb. Okay, next book on the list is not a book, it's a short story, and it's called Zacora. And this is short story written by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie for Amazon. And I decided to listen to this one on audio, and I found it very good. In such a short space of time, because the audiobook was exactly an hour and 20 minutes. And in an hour and 20 minutes, she managed to completely introduce me to a cast of characters and give me the rundown on all of them and put them within a story situation. And yeah, I was blown away because I was like, who does that? Like, who does that? Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie does that. I mean, like, the short story was just so engrossing, and you had like a really good sense of who these characters were, and you wanted to know more about what was going to happen with them. So what I'm hoping is that she'll do I hope she'll do a full-length, novel about this particular story, Zacora. So Zacora is basically a story about a young woman who finds herself pregnant, and you follow what happens once she announces her pregnancy. So you see her before she's pregnant, and then you see her once she announces this pregnancy. And it's from there that the story really gets a bit more involved, is when we see what happens once she announces the pregnancy. So good. Oh my God, I hope she does a full-length novel of that one. Next book on my list is Freeman by Leonard Pitts Jr. again. Okay, so this was the first book that we read in my Read So Lit book club, which is on Patreon. If you're interested in that, I will link it below if you're interested in joining. And we had a wonderful discussion we had two discussions, actually, two really big discussions. And it was just, oh my God, exquisite. This is a story of Sam. He is a free black man who escaped slavery earlier. And when the book starts, we're at the point where slavery has been abolished. So Sam decides he's going to go back down south, and he's going to walk down there. I think he's in Philadelphia, and he's going to walk all the way down south to get his woman Tilda that he left when he escaped slavery. And my goodness, what a story this is. It's a journey, and stories that are clinched on this idea of a journey always have so many things that they try to teach us or tell us. And Leonard Pitts Jr. does such a wonderful job of instructing us on this time period by immersing us completely in it through all of these really interesting characters that literally jump off the page at you, and how he engrosses us immediately in this whole journey of Sam going to get Tilda. Here again, just like in The Last Thing You Surrender, there you will be, clutching the pearls you haven't got around your neck, wondering about, oh my God, what is going to happen to these people, or what is going to happen next. All I can say is, if you have not picked up Leonard Pitts Jr., do it today. Go on your Amazon or go to your independent bookstore and get the damn books. That's all I gotta say. All right. The last book on my list is, of course, Black and British, A Forgotten History by David Olusoga. All right, now, as you can see, this is quite the chunker, over 600 pages, 600, and I think it's 625 to be exact. But but to be really exact, it's about reading 529 because you got all of the bibliography and stuff. This book, oh my God, took me 2 months to read. I read it as a buddy read with Patrice. We had a great time reading it because we realized how much we did not know about British history and Black British history. And we didn't realize all of the connections between the US and the UK and how our stories do link up a little bit too closely, okay? Just a little bit too closely. But I say you should definitely make an effort to read this book if you're interested in learning about Black and British, because the stuff you're going to learn here, you're never going to learn it at school because ain't nobody checking for Black people like that. This gives you the rundown history, gives you all the information that you could possibly want to know. And it's just mind-boggling how much we don't learn at school that is important to history. And this book just thoroughly informed me to no end. I was, tabbing like mad, like look at all my tabs. I was not playing while I was reading this book, okay? So, yeah, I highly, highly recommend this one. If for some reason you're the kind of person who is not really up for reading 520 something pages of a nonfiction book, you can go and check out the BBC series of Black and British, which David Olusoga is doing that series. You can check that out online if you feel like you can't get through the book. But I highly recommend it. It's such a good read. It took me 2 months, and you know what? I do not regret. And it probably is one of the reasons why I'm not going to catch my goal, my reading goal this year. But you know what? I don't really care because I feel like I really accomplished something reading this book. And I learned so much. So no regrets for me. Excellent read, and I highly recommend it. So that's all the books. That's 12 of my top reads of 2020. Hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed talking to you about these books. Comment below and tell me what, a couple of your top reads were. And if any of the ones I talked to you about, were they on your top as well? And yeah, look for me soon in another video. Bye-bye.